second, I'll pass over to Alex, and then Alex will do her presentation, and then after that there will be a chance for us to ask some questions if we have any. So without further ado, Alex, I will pass over to you.
Thank you very much. I will now just share my screen, so I will disappear and you will see the slides coming up. Hopefully. Perfect. Okay, so thank you for inviting me to present to you all today. The opening slide has actually got one of my favourite doodles from the collection. So underneath the printed text is this sort of quite simple but cartoonish ink drawing of a man sort of leaping across the page. And it's these sort of unexpected, whimsical images that are always fun to come across when you're working with the rare books. This is actually from a book on alchemy. The official title is Brevis Excursus in Bathologium Cursitani, and I apologise in advance for the terrible pronunciations that I'll be giving. And this book was printed in 1604, and the illustration, the doodle, is probably made from not long after. So before leaping into the talk, just a little bit of background as to who I am and what I do. So as Kate said, my name is Dr Alexandra Hill, pronoun she, her, and I'm the librarian for the Printed Rare Materials Audit at the Wellcome Collection in London. This means I'm responsible for the inventory of all the pre-1851 early printed books and ephemera held at Wellcome. And this is around 95,000 items. Although, as you can imagine, working from home since March has halted a lot of this work for the time being. While the officially titled Wellcome Collection has only been around since 2007, Sir Henry Wellcome started collecting items from the 1890s. One of the first purchases were a number of rare books from the collection of arts and crafts designer William Morris in 1898. By the time of Wellcome's death in 1936, the Library Museum was rumoured to hold over 1 million items. While the majority of museum objects, particularly the ethnographic artefacts, have long been dispersed to other institutions across the world, Wellcome continues to hold a huge collection of rare books, visual materials, manuscripts, and other archives. These are mostly focused on medical history, but they also cover the socio-cultural aspects of health and medicine. And we continue to build that collection today. There are also thousands of medical objects held on long-term loan at the Science Museum in London, with many on display at the new Wellcome galleries, though obviously at the moment we are unable to see them. So in my talk today, I'll be sharing finds we've come across during the inventory to help us think beyond a rare book as simply something to read, looking at ways in which rare books were designed to be interacted with and what can be discovered hidden within the pages. I've done my best to incorporate as much of the digitised material as possible to allow you the chance to explore these items further if you wish. For the non-digitised materials, once Wellcome reopens, anyone can request images to be taken or request to handle the material in the library. Ultimately, what I want to get across is the sheer breadth and depth of discoveries that can be made within rare books, the questions these finds raise from both a research and collection viewpoint, and hopefully to show the beauty and stories hidden within the pages. If this slide move. Perfect. So, thinking about how rare books were used, I'll be focusing on 3 specific areas, highlighted by the 3 word bubbles on the slide. First of all, decorating and interacting, looking at ways in which books were designed to be interacted with beyond reading, focusing on where space was deliberately left for decoration and filling in. Jotting down notes and thoughts. Paper was an expensive material, and so the blank spaces left in a book were ideal spaces to add to the book's content or as a place for thoughts and ideas. Finally, storing and losing items, sharing some of the more interesting finds we found within the rare books, from pressed flowers to miniature paintings. First, a brief look at book design and book interaction in Europe in the 15th century. The image filling the slide is a page of illuminated manuscript on anatomy, and this is from the Wellcome Collection, and it dates from the mid-15th century. This page is typical of the period, consisting of a block of beautiful handwritten text, with margins hand-decorated with a colourful trailing floral design and a large decorated capital D. The page also shows evidence of the process behind the decoration, with lines showing where the scribe ruled out places for the text and the illuminator blocked off areas for the illustrations. This was the cultural world in which printing began, when in 1450, the movable type printing press was first used by Johannes Gutenberg in Germany. Printing soon spread across Europe, with the first printing press arriving in England in 1476. However, it would be wrong to assume that once print came along, the manuscript culture would simply disappear, and it remained popular long into the following centuries. In fact, print was not an immediate success, and incunabula, this is books printed between 1450 and 1500, and coming from the Latin phrase from birth, demonstrate an important moment of transition. They were designed to appear like manuscripts and gave owners the chance to personalize the text through use of illuminators in the same way as manuscripts. To illustrate this, I'll be focusing on examples from the incunabula collection at Wellcome, of which there are approximately 620 items, and about half of these are digitized and available through the Wellcome website. So on the screen, we have 2 pages from 2 different incunabula showing both before and after a printed book was decorated. On the left is a page from Abbreviato P. il Supra Decades Blondi, printed in 1481. Within the printed text remains a large blank square space where the illuminator was meant to draw a capital letter. For some reason, this book was never illuminated, despite it being designed for it. On the right is a page from De Veris et Salutaribus Animi Gaudiis Dialogus from 1491. But the blank space at the beginning of the printed text has been filled in with an elaborate scrolling golden letter Q in a green and red box with flowers and insects flowing from the 2 corners. Some books are even more obvious in showing what needed to be added. On this slide, we have another 2 pages to compare side by side. Once again, on the left, we have a page from De Omnibus Mundi Balnese, printed in 1493. Here we have printed text in 2 columns, and where there are blank spaces in which to add hand-illuminated letters, there's also a tiny printed letter to indicate to the illuminator exactly which letter should go where. On the right is a page from Opera Medica from 1481. This has exactly the same design features, but this time an illuminator has filled in all the gaps with capital letters in blue and red with gold highlights. They've even decorated all the margins with beautiful flowers and geometric shapes coloured in red, blues, greens and golds. Design was highly dependent on who the owner sent the book to, which means that each copy can be unique and highly personalised. And it was not just the text which was being decorated. Here we have a beautiful double-page spread with printed text at the top and below a large illustration of the city of Rome, hand-coloured with white walls, red tile roofs, green fields, and a beautiful blue river Tiber running through the centre. On the right is a similar image from the same book, showing the earliest depiction of an English city in print. This, as you can see, both Italian and English architecture in this image are portrayed as being very similar, so you can probably take these representations with a bit of a pinch of salt. They're highly idealised, but absolutely beautiful as well. Both pages are from the Liber Chronicorum, or more commonly known as the Nuremberg Chronicle, and this is printed in 1493. At Wellcome, we have 3 copies, but not all are decorated in the same way. So while all 3 will have come off the printing press looking exactly the same, they were designed for different owners to make them their own. And actually, the one we have on screen is actually from the William Morris collection, although it would have been hand-coloured quite a few centuries before it came into his possession. As the centuries rolled on, hand-colouring became far more prescriptive, though. So on the slide, we have examples of 3 hand-coloured pages from both the 18th and 19th centuries. On the left is a printed plate from a book on the use of lichens and mosses in medicine and art, with 10 rectangular boxes painted to represent the colours of different mosses, mostly brown, although there is a purple-coloured box in the middle labelled as prune. As a book owner, you would want the boxes to be coloured accurately, so you could identify the lichens and mosses in the image. There's no point having a box labelled prune if you then decorated it in bright yellow with red polka dots. So there is a limit to how personalised these books and images could be. Similarly, on the right, we have 2 printed plates, each with 36 identical engravings of butterflies and larvae. These images are from 2 different editions. The page from 1854 has been fully hand-coloured with the butterflies in various shades of red, yellow, brown, some with spots, some without. Wellcome also has an edition from 1839, but for some reason, only a handful of butterflies have been decorated to get this beautiful image of some being coloured in and others being left black and white. In a world before lithographs, widespread photography and colour printing, hand-coloured illustrations were more than just a way of personalising a book, but a way to present, as accurately as possible, images of creatures and objects that the reader may never have had the chance to see in real life. And books were also designed to help readers in other ways. Uranoscopia, or the pure language of the stars unfolded by the motion of the seven erratics, printed in 1790, was deliberately designed and printed with blank spaces for the owner to record the movement of the stars and to complete their horoscopes. Two of the pages are shown here. On the left is an engraved astrological natal chart in a diamond shape, filled in by the book owner Frederick Hockley. Here we have the date, time, and latitude of his birth, and this is surrounded by astrological stars and symbols such as the Sun and Libra, Virgo and Pisces, and these are laid out across 12 different houses. And each house represents different aspects of that person's life, such as their outlook, motivations, love, and family. On the right is a circular astrological chart based on the time and place of death of Frederick's grandmother, Jane Hockley, but unfortunately, the stars and symbols have not been added here. The way the book was designed and used not only helped the reader at the time, but is also incredibly useful to modern scholars. The personal nature of the book means there is some excellent provenance, and on the screen is the ownership inscription saying who bought the book, how, and when. So here we have Frederick Hockley, his book, January the 5th, 1833, 8:30 p.m., the gift of his kind friend, Mr. Denley. So maybe a Christmas or New Year gift. The owner himself is of interest. Frederick Hockley is associated with the English occult revival in the 19th century. Not much is known about his early years, and this book is believed to be the only evidence of his own date of birth. The person who gifted the book, Mr. John Denley, was himself an occult bookseller in Covent Garden and was Frederick's employer at the time of giving the book. And this reveals an aspect of the relationship between the two men and may have even had an influence on Frederick's move into the occult. What this book does show is the important role a book can have in a person's life. Books can have a very personal connection, and their value is more than just the text. So that's how books were deliberately designed for interaction, but there are far more creative ways in which they were used by their owners. The image I have on the screen right now is a page from the 1651 printed edition of The Art of Distillation. What is unusual is in the way all the margins and edges of the printed text are covered in handwriting. And at the top of the page, we have the sentence, Rebecca Tallamy, her book of Stilling and Receipts, 1736. So this printed book has been adapted into a personal recipe book. During the early modern period, paper was 2/3 the cost of book production. It was incredibly expensive, and most people would not just have sheets of paper lying around. Nowadays, we generally have access to as much paper as we want in certain parts of the world. And nowadays, we also have unlimited digital space. But blank space in the early modern period was an important commodity, and they used blank spaces in books for notes and doodles. Most blank spaces, also known as white space, can be found on the pages between the front and back covers of the text. This is also where you're most likely to find evidence of ownership, such as book plates and inscriptions, which I won't go into during this talk, but can happily talk about more after in the Q&A session. Notes can be linked to the subject of the book, or they can simply be the book that was closest to hand. Ultimately, the words and images added to these white spaces can reveal the relationship between the book and its owner. So here we have another couple of pages from Rebecca's book. On the left, we have a page printed with text at the top and bottom of the page. And as it's a book on distillation, we have a woodcut of a glass and stopper in the middle. But the majority of the print has been crossed out with black ink, with handwritten recipes across the page. It's the same on the right, where there's a printed recipe at the top for making a liquor against toothache, and below are handwritten 2 further recipes. One for improving cider, and as I quote, as practiced by the Herefordshire artists, and one for making beer, wine, or any liquor fine. These are the notes you're most likely to come across within the Wellcome Collection. We have a huge collection of recipe books and medicine, and a lot of users would add additional cures, maybe even family or homemade recipes, into these books to provide a specific repository for this information. But sometimes you can come across something a bit more unusual. Once again, we have an image of a page of a printed book with all the margins and blank spaces covered in handwriting. But on one of the first pages, you come across this intriguing statement written by the previous owner. Whereas for about 6 years past, I have been grievously tormented by drinking strong liquors. Therefore, for the future, I intend by God's assistance to drink nothing strong, but to live a temperate life. And it's signed by a man named Thomas Cook, September the 9th, 1743. Throughout this book are similar statements for every time he tries to abstain from hard liquors. And what this book represents is Thomas's difficult journey with alcohol. Some further statements written in the book. After February 5th, 1743 to 44, drink no wine, nor malt liquor, nor spirituous liquors. And there are similar instructions on February the 13th, April the 12th, and June the 17th. They're all a mix of instructions and religious phrases. Unfortunately, without more provenance details, it's very difficult to trace exactly who this Thomas Cook was. Using the accession registers at Wellcome, I was able to find that the book was bought from a bookshop in Cambridge in August in 1929. But unfortunately, after that, the path grows cold. But why did Cook choose this book to write down his struggles? The printed book in question was the English Physician's Guide, which was claiming to teach the way to change, cure, and remedy all diseases. Within this book, spiritual health was the focus rather than physical health, and you can see this in the religious quotations that Cook cites in the margins. We also need to remember that there's a strong link between temperance and religion, and that may be another reason why this book was chosen. The ways in which books trigger visual... It's interesting to see how the ways in which books trigger visual thoughts and ideas. And for Cook, this was an important place for him to write down his thoughts and struggles. It also shows how long books remained kept and how long they were used for. Cook was writing this book 80 years after it had been printed. So he might have held this on for a long time. But none of this extensive marginalia and none of this story was previously recorded on the catalogue. And it was only going through the material during the inventory that we actually came across it. Ultimately, what this shows is you cannot know what a book will contain until you open it. Another example is Wellcome's copy of the Dissector's Guide from 1846. This is a book aimed at students of anatomy. But what's interesting about this copy is that every blank page has been used for pencil sketches. So basically, the owner has used this as his own personal sketchbook. From left to right, we have a page containing 5 pencil sketches of faces in profile, along with a shoe, a full-length caricature of a gentleman with a hat, cane, and a large nose, a nude male and female figure described as Cupid and Psyche, a profile portrait of a surgeon, Robert Liston, and 2 fighting cockerels. And this is just part of a range of images that you can find in this book. Once again, I tried to trace the provenance of the book, and I managed to track it down to an auction house in October 1931. This book was actually bought with 100 other books. And actually, according to a lot of the owner transcriptions, it appears that it was more of a job lot. So I can't find one single owner that I can trace it back to, unfortunately. But we can make guesses as to the owner. They were likely a medical student given the topic of the printed book, and the illustrations of surgeons and anatomy held within it. But other questions remain. Were they drawing people they knew? Were they drawing art they had seen? Were they drawing while they were a student? While they were in a lecture? Or was this used as a space long after, similar to Thomas Cook? Surgeon Robert Liston passed away soon after the book was printed, but he was a pioneering surgeon whose work may have inspired the reader. He was famous for being the fastest surgeon around. Nowadays, we might not think of this as a particularly good thing, but in an era before anaesthetics, the quicker the surgery, the higher the chances of survival. Now, these are particularly beautiful sketches, but some of my favourites are the more abstract doodles. And it is up to your own interpretations what was going through the owner's mind at the time. So on screen, I have 4 images from 4 different books from across Europe in the centuries. They're all drawn within medical texts, but obviously the owners have used the spaces for very different drawings and techniques. First one is L'Anatomia del Corpo Umano from 1715. We have this lovely ink drawing of an urn filled with flowers, surrounded by insects, and for some obscure reason, there's also a fish floating in the air as well. But I just love coming across images like this when you're looking through a book. Second one is Observations de Médecine et Chirurgie from 1717. This beautiful drawing of a skeleton, but where all the pieces are there, but there's just something about it that I just really enjoyed coming across. Guia del Regimen Sanitatis. This is a book on health. So why there are these 3 simple ink drawings of what appeared to be either dogs or foxes appear. What was going through the owner's mind when they drew this, I'm not sure. And the one on the right does look a bit more like a glove puppet. But once again, just these beautiful images just appearing out of nowhere when you least expect them. And finally, Disputa dello Excellentissimo Filosofo. This is a book on sort of medical philosophy. Has this beautiful ink drawing of sort of a man and a woman in contemporary late 16th century clothing, and both holding a bunch of flowers. Now, if you're just looking through a medical book, you just don't expect to find these images just lying and littering the pages. And that's what makes rare books just so beautiful, is it's not just the way they started out that makes them beautiful. It's not just the different bits of type, the engravings, the illustrations. It's also the way they were used and the way other people use them as well. In my final section, I want to talk about things left behind. Here we have an image of a small brown envelope we found in one of the books. It is addressed to a Monsieur de Bac in Clichy, and on the postmark on the stamp, it shows it was posted in Paris in 1907. Unfortunately, there was no letter inside, but we've been able to uncover quite a few things about the addressee. Louis de Bac was a pharmacist in Paris whose huge collection of books, manuscripts, and pharmacy jars came into the Wellcome Collection in 1919. Records show that over 4,000 books were in the collection, and it is only now that we're starting to identify them, thanks to finds such as this envelope. Books have long been used as places for storing items. I recently came across a quote from 1651 on storing bills of exchange. These are sort of payment notes on paper that contained instructions on how to keep them safe. I would advise you, for prevention of loss, to keep a letter case, or which is better, a pocket almanac, or a small pocket paper book with clasps, and carry your bills of exchange in such a book so they may be kept clean and whole and less subject to loss. So was de Bac keeping this envelope safe? Or probably, which is more likely, like so many of us nowadays, it was being used as a bookmark. I'm sure you're very much like me. There'll be plenty of books where you've just got random receipts, random train tickets littered throughout your books. And actually, in terms of other items we found in the books, we found 18th century business card for a cafe in Granada. We've also found an advertisement and a timetable for the Paris to London Railway Company from the 1890s. Similar to notes and illustrations, the relationship to the book can suggest how and why the object came to be there. So here we have some of the more common finds. And when I mean common finds, actually finding an item within a book is still fairly rare. But if you are going to find something, it's going to be something like this. So on the left, we have an image of a page from a printed book. And we have a pressed dry flower inside with yellow petals. And on the right, we have a newspaper cutting from 1913 with the intriguing title, Ghost Laid Low by Rector, Strange Spook Story from Leicester, Bedclothes Torn from Sleeping Visitors. Now you come across a handful of books with pressed flowers. The weight of the book made it an excellent space for pressing and preserving plant specimens. You can find multiple leaves and flowers dotted throughout the pages. I have an example here from a pharmacopoeia. This is a book listing medicinal drugs and their uses, for which flowers had an important use. And actually, you can probably notice on this page, there are lists where they say, take flowers of rosemary, take this flower, use this. Was this flower going to be used to make a drug? Some books were even designed to have plant specimens added. Similar to earlier, when I was showing you books where there were spaces left deliberately for decoration and for filling in information, There were books that had deliberate spaces left for you to place certain plant specimens and to make notes. These finds are not just interesting for historians, but also to botanists who can use such specimens to trace the history of plants and the ways in which they are described and collected. The newspaper cutting, meanwhile, was found in a book of miscellanies upon various subjects. Clearly, this was an interesting tale that the owner decided to keep within a book of anecdotes and other strange tales. Similar examples include a book on Egyptology, where newspaper cuttings from an Egyptian exhibition held in London were pasted on the front board. But what about the more unusual finds we've come across? We were intrigued to come across an 18th century playing card. We have 3 images on the screen showing the front and back of the card, as well as the card in situ in the book. The back is printed with a repeating star pattern in blue, while the front is printed with 8 coins, hand-painted in yellowy gold colour. Playing cards in Europe had been around since the 13th century, with printed ones appearing around the same time as printed books. This was found in an 18th century Spanish book on treating illnesses in camps. Was someone playing cards while in a camp? You can identify the type of playing card from the pattern. The playing cards we most use today are the ones with hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. And this is known as the French set. Here we have 8 coins, and the pattern matches that of the Catalonian designs. What is most interesting about this find is in its survival. Playing cards are only small pieces of paper which are handled frequently and not very carefully. How many examples of early modern playing cards actually survive? And this goes back to our earlier idea of keeping things safe in a book. By this item finding its way into the book is a key factor in its survival. And I think this is our best find so far. So this is a miniature gouache painting on mica from the mid-19th century. And this was found in a book, Qatar Mansuri, printed in Madras in 1846. And this is a collection of Tamil folk tales. So obviously most of the discussions I've had, most of the examples I've given so far have been around European printing. And this is obviously printing from a different part of the world. And Wellcome has a collection of books from all over. So on the screen, we have 2 images of the painting. One is of the item actually sitting on the title page, so as we found it as we opened the book, and the other is a close-up. The painting itself is on a small rectangular transparent sheet of mica. Now this is a transparent mineral formed between strata of granite, although it does look a bit similar to plastic, but it's definitely a mineral. The image is of a man dressed in traditional Indian clothing and sitting on the floor cleaning boots. And to the right is a bright green chest. Gouache painting is similar to watercolour technique, but the paint dries opaque. And this technique has been used for centuries. From my brief research, I've actually identified this as a company painting. These are paintings created by Indian artists for the European tourist market, often by those working for the East India Company. And Wellcome has albums of similar paintings in the collection. Finding this painting raises a couple of issues. First of all, conservation. Before we came across it during the inventory, there was no record of this painting hidden within the pages. Given the fragility of this item, it needs to be stored in a much different environment to that of the book in which it was found. Secondly, and probably more importantly, sensitivity. Not only were company paintings products of the East India Company and British imperialism, but also one of the main traits of company paintings was in their focus on race and caste, and in categorizing groups of individuals. Much more needs to be done to provide a clearer context for these works and address their colonial heritage. So just coming across something as simple as a painting raises so many more problems and issues that need to be dealt with. So what do all these examples reveal about rare books? And here I have a slide of bullet points, which I'm going to read through. A rare book is more than just a text or something to read. They were designed to be interacted with in a variety of ways, and this changed as the world of print developed. The way books were used provide an insight into their history and the lives of their owners, the things they jotted down, the images they drew. You never know what you might find under the covers. and there are items and stories hidden within every page. Ultimately, the better access users have to these rare books, the easier the collection can be explored and shared in new ways. And that's one of the reasons why we're carrying out an inventory, to really find out what we have and what more can be done and shared with people. 25,000 of the rare books at Wellcome are digitised online, and these are available either on the site or through free-to-access partners. We also have examples of digitised books from collections across the UK. So I just want to show here that you don't have to rely on going into the library to see an item. There are so many things out there that you can explore in your own time, in your own ways. And here I'm going to end, and probably this is a bit of a plug, I'm going to end on an image of the main Wellcome Collection search page. This is welcomecollection.org/collections. And this is where you can search through thousands of images of books, manuscripts, and visual materials held at Wellcome. So visual materials, I'm talking about paintings, prints, engravings, photographs. There's a huge collection out there that is open to explore. You can filter by date, format, and there are even options to filter by colour if you want to find images across the collection with sort of similar or specific colour patterns. So I just want to say thank you for attending. I just got a couple of emails on screen if you're interested. So if you want to know more about the collections in general, you go to collections@welcomecollection.org. If you're interested in the books in general or something that has been raised by my talk, you can email me at a.hill@welcome.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. That was so interesting. Thank you. And what I'm going to do, everybody, as well, is I'm going to put the link to that website in the chat box as well. So you can copy that catalogue. And I'll also put those email addresses in the chat as well, so that you've got those if you need them. But does anybody have any questions? You're welcome to ask here, or you can write them in the chat if you would prefer.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. I was wondering, when it comes to the library, can we access that online without a library card, or?
There's a few different things for that. At the moment, without a library card, you can go online, and most of the time you can link straight through. So all the images online, you can use free to use as even without having a membership card. However, if you want to actually go into the library, you need a membership. And maybe some of the sites that you link through to might ask for a library card. But the majority of the time, those 25,000 images, you just simply search on the website, it's there. It's Creative Commons, so you can download that free to use in any way you want. There's no kind of commercial restrictions in that sense. But that's all clearly laid out on the website, how you can use them. And like I said, even if it's not been digitized, but you think, actually, that might be quite interesting. That sounds interesting. I want to know more about it. Once the building reopens, Wellcome are very open to any requests for any images as well.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just wondering about that, you know, if it would be possible, because of commuting up and down, and we can't go in at the moment, so.
Of course, yeah. I mean, same with me. People who actually work, staff that work in the building, trying to, you know, write things about the collection. We're having to be very reliant on the digitized images ourselves as well. So I think that's also showing the gaps and the issues with digitized content and how we need to make it better, because we're all now realizing, actually, you know what, this needs to be sorted. And actually the website is actually just started coming live, so there's going to be a lot more content added to it and a lot more features going to be added to it over the coming months. So hopefully
that would be great. Yeah,
it's even more. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Any other questions? Oh, Tess, hang on. Let me. I've pressed ask to unmute, so you might have something that comes up that says. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
I thought that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very kind.
I was going to say to you, I've just been doing a book in lockdown through Pallant House Gallery, right? Because we were given a book and some tools. And
Oh wow!
If I, how am I going to do this? Hold on a minute. I'm going to try and do something like rest this camera here.
Go for it.
Right, because I don't know how to back to front the camera, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, some of the things you said about was can you see my book?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
That's a poem, and that's wax on the poem.
Wow.
And then this was with the colouring pencils that I was given. And then this is a drawing, pencil drawing. And then this is like a bit of tissue paper over wax. And then that's wax dripped and drawn on. And then that's about the COVID. Yeah. And I was just going to show, oh, that's some printing. My printer kept printing them out, so I had to add them on there.
Ooh,
And this
okay,
is about
yeah.
Tom. I love Captain Tom. That was back in lockdown.
Yeah.
And then I did my friends. I don't know if you can see that's a postage
Stamping as well.
and it says a kind gesture from very dear friends. And one of my friends that sent me that passed away just before Christmas. And then I've done all this doodly doodle sort of stuff. And then a pen and ink of where I live. But I wanted to show you this because this was a walk I went on near me called Centurion Way. And can you see the pressed flowers?
They're beautiful. Yeah. I love finding pressed flowers in books because it's just, it's that bit of, you see, you know, this man-made product of a book and then this bit of nature in between is always beautiful to find.
And then I've done this poem, right? What goes like this? It goes, there is a stillness in the air. People aren't rushing everywhere. Bird song, nature and despair. All those lovely people giving care. On the news they do declare. People so ill, no relatives there. Overheating and gasping for air. Sometimes life's not fucking fair. Excuse my French. Stay positive, calm and prepare. Coronavirus is here, so beware. Hope for a vaccine we can share. For people are suffering out there. From this pandemic, please take care. We will all need time to repair. This situation is beyond compare. Nature and environment here to share. We should make the most of it, I declare. Stay creative and take care. But then the other thing I was thinking, I got this the other day from something I got on, I purchased, right? And it was a tool to do woodland craft in the woods. And can you see all the stamps of the birds and everything?
Oh yeah, they're beautiful.
And I put that in the book because that's going in the book. And then at the back, I've still got some pages to do. That was the first sort of lockdown and bits and bobs. I did this, which was a Madge Gill bit that's going to be stuck in there because I applied for the thingy bob. And then I got a letter from 10 Downing Street, London, from the Prime Minister. And it says, I'm writing to you to update you on the steps we are taking to combat the coronavirus. Anyway, I've sort of stuck that at the back, can you see, of the book with those things, great big huge paper clips. And then what I'm going to do, you know, Julia Rope, who's doing the Madge Gill outside in thing at Pallant House Gallery. I don't know if you've heard about that, but Julia, who's on this thing, is the selected artist. And she'd been doing some work with black paper and white gel pen. And I'm going to do some white gel pens on the outside of it as well.
Yeah,
and then finish it off with the lockdown stuff. So I just wanted to share that with you.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Because I thought it was applicable to what you were just discussing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's
what's your name again?
Yeah.
What's your name again? What's your name
Alex,
again?
Alex.
Oh, Alex. Well, thanks very much for that talk.
Thank you. And really thank you for sharing that, because I think that your work really just shows sort of the beauty that can be hidden within every page and what you can really do with a blank space. And yeah, that was being done. That's been done for hundreds of years. It's a very fun thing to do.
I'm in the process of making a book and binding it as well, because I did graphic
Ooh, that'd be good.
And I've done a BA in art design and media, so I know all about the Gutenberg press and that, because we learned it at uni and college. But it's just such a great thing to have a go at doing different books, and it's lovely to see really rare books where there's only sort of one of them made or whatever. And I think it's so important to have them in museums for people to see in the future.
And making them accessible, not just simply hiding them away in stacks and saying, we've got them.
It expresses our culture, doesn't it? So, you know.
Exactly.
Thanks,
Anyway,
Tess.
thank you.
Thanks, Tess. That was brilliant. Thank you for sharing. We've got a couple of other people who want to share, and we've got a question. So I'm just going to go, first of all, to Helen, who's got something she would like to share. Then I'm going to go to Julia, who has also got something to share. And then finally, and then I'll go to Michelle, who's got a question. So we'll do it in that order. So Helen, do you want to show us what you've got?
Yeah, I liked the talk because it reminded me of my uncle's book collection that we were sorting through after he passed away, and he was a bit of a squirrel, and he put, when you were talking about all the things that you could find in the books, there was always stuff inside his books, cuttings, flowers, tickets, and they kind of gave a little window into his mind. But one of the books, I mean, there was lots about Poland, but
it's beautiful.
There was this book, because it's a medical thing, I thought, it's the anatomy of the female body, and there's one for there's another one for the man, and you open it up and you've got sort of different diagrams like that.
Oh, are they lifting flap ones as well?
Yes, I think the other one is a lifting flap one.
Yeah. These are fascinating things. We actually have some from the 16th century, which is similar to that. Where you can imagine they're very fragile because the amount of people who keep lifting up those flaps all over the last few hundred years. That's in beautiful condition. That's a very nice book.
And that's the kind of front of it, which is the Atlas of the Anatomy and Physiology of a Female Human Body.
It's also nice that we've got the Venus de Milo on the front, you know, to show the female human body, you know.
Yeah. So yeah, it's quite nice.
And it must be so nice, all the memories that are within those books, and clearly, you know, meant so much to your uncle as well.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you, Helen. That was lovely for you to share that with us. Julia, would you like to share yours with us?
Good afternoon, everybody. Right, pressing flowers in books was something I used to do as a child with my mother. And I just went to my bookcase and got my book of fairy tales called the Fairy Latchkey, and I'm going to try to turn it round for you. So it's called the Fairy Latchkey, and when you go inside, you find these pressed leaves that I did maybe, I would say about 55 years ago, and they're amongst the book. And we used to do that with lots of books, but I knew it would be in this one, so I got it out. And they're very delicate after 50 years, 5 years, they're extremely delicate and fragile. And I can just imagine that if you've got a book from the 1830s and you find a pressed flower in it, how delicate that's going to be. Is that
Sorry, carry on.
No. So I just thought I'd share that with you because, you know, my grandchildren are going to get these books and maybe they'll end up somewhere in 100 years' time. You know,
I like the idea you don't tell them there are any flowers in there, so they just open them up and they just get revealed sort of as they go through.
Yeah. And I still do it myself. I still put flowers in books. And my mother used to, if a children's book was all black and white printed, as it was maybe 50, 60 years ago, colour wasn't quite so readable, she would paint the pictures for me in the book.
Wow.
And she would fill in the little lithograph type drawings with watercolour watercolour paints, and so that I had a coloured picture to look at when I was reading the story. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you.
No, brilliant examples. Thank you. I mean, that's what I love about rare books is it's not just something we say, oh, that happened 500 years ago. These are still things and experiences that we have nowadays. Yeah, pressing a leaf between a rare book, yeah, painting between the lines of, you know, black and white engraving. This is something that, you know, we have done and continue to do, and that's what I really enjoy, is finding those different aspects of human life within the collection.
And what's really lovely about this book, it's that when I bought it, it was secondhand, so it was published in 1909, this book of fairy tales. So it's had a long history, and it's got that marking on the pages. It's sort of like a fungus, isn't it?
Foxing, yeah.
Foxing, yeah. So yeah, it's quite. I don't know if it's rare yet, though.
The fact that it's got all those leaves in makes it automatically unique, because it's had the story of being in your life, and that's what makes it unique.
Okay.
Yeah.
and they're falling out all over the place. I've now just found another little one. I think they're coleus. Leaves, maybe. Sort of colour reminds me. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
I did. Okay.
Thanks, Julia. That's lovely to see. Michelle, should we come to you, and then Anna will come to you? I know you've got a question as well. So Michelle.
Thanks. Julia sharing that book actually leads quite nicely into my question, because I know you said, Alex, that the painting that was on the mica obviously needs to be stored in different conditions because it's not a book. And so I just wondered, like, when you find the items like the flowers and those things in there, do you then store them separately from the book? And is there some kind of record where you can sort of like cross reference that those were the things that were found in the book? Because I feel like that's it's an interesting part of the story of the book.
Yes, we've been working on this during lockdown and actually coming up with an actual procedure, because there'd not been one beforehand. So our procedure now is, if it's something that's on paper, so similar to that envelope or a printed card, that can stay within the book. It's the same material. It's not going to deteriorate any more than the book. It's not going to damage the book. And we'll also be noting it in the catalogue records or where it is. I'm not sure if or when that'll be publicly available, but certainly from our point of view, we'll know, okay, this book contains this on this page. For things like the pressed flowers and leaves, there's a much larger conservation issue. This is decomposing organic matter. This isn't great. So for those, we're making sure we highlight them and we make sure we pass that information directly onto the conservation team, so they can monitor them. So once again, not removing them, not taking them out, but just making sure that they're on a list to be monitored and sort of just keep a closer eye on them. The things such as the mica painting, yes, that will have to be removed from the book. But the plan is, so far, you can take it out of the book, but then put the book in a box and then have a smaller box within that box that contains the painting. So that might be a way of doing it. Or if we have to remove the painting altogether, make sure there's a facsimile that is kept within the book and a note that says on the record, there was an original painting in this, and probably the best way would be to be able to see it actually within conservation. So that item probably wouldn't go into the library. It wouldn't be requestable in a public and open space, but you'd be able to request it to see it within conservation, and it would be cared for there. So there's a couple of different options, but at the moment we can't decide what to do because we're not actually in the building. We can't sort of move it at the moment, but no matter what happens, there will always be evidence of the relationship between that item and that book, because that's so important to maintain.
Oh, that's really interesting to know. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Michelle. Anna, your question.
Thank you. Actually, Michelle exactly asked what I was interested in, which was about this idea of, what do you do with the artifact, and how do you kind of, manage all of that? So that was kind of really interesting to hear. I mean, I felt like they're kind of almost little time capsules, these things in the books that you find, and, just like really enriched that book and, who's owned it and the history of it, and it's kind of got memories embedded in it. But I suppose just picking up on a little bit of what Michelle was asking as well, and what you were just kind of answering there, was I wondered maybe how that material, the organic materials particularly, might change the sort of like book as it's aging. And, when you then find the book, have you kind of like found something that's happened to the book through that process of having a flower embedded in it, or something, you know, that's not of the book, you know, originally. Not of the book.
Yes, of course. I mean, sometimes when we open the book and it's got a flower in, it's just there, it's just sitting there. But often you will also see the indentation of the flower and leaf on the opposite page, where sort of it's been moist when it's been closed together, so that pattern is then passed on to the other page as well. But something related to this is there's an interesting project going on at Wellcome Conservation called it's like Spells and Spills, where actually they're bringing in scientists to actually analyze some of the marks and stains actually on some of the manuscripts and books to see what was spilt on them. So if they had a recipe book, they're actually trying to see what material ended up on the book. Was it a particular chemical? Was it a particular type of food? Was it a particular type of drink? Is it the same across Europe, across the world, or are different chemicals being used? So there are lots of different stains and stuff that are actually being analysed as we speak to sort of get a better picture of, you know, what was actually left on this book that's not, you know, immediately, you know, visibly obvious. Like what's actually become part of that paper and part of the physical, you know, binding and pages of that book. So there's some really interesting stuff going on there as well.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And is that sort of a project that's just being researched at the moment?
Yeah, it's unfortunately it was just about to start just before lockdown, and obviously at the moment people can't get in to sort of carry out work on the collections at the moment. But hopefully that'll build and more research will be able to done on it. And I think there's hopefully you should hear more about that sort of in the future. But
Thank you.
Right. Well, we're just coming up to time. I know, Tess, do you want to show us? We've probably only got about a minute more. Tess, if you want to show us another book. I know you've been holding some things up. You might have to press the button that might have come up on your screen.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
Yep.
We can now. Yeah.
But this is hold on. This is a book about the London Artist Book Fair that I had an exhibition in at the end of my degree at Portsmouth, and I had a book there for sale, and I actually sold one. And I haven't got that book to show you, but just to say that was in 1999, so it was last century. So I kept it, but I did actually purchase a book there, and the book that I've been holding up is by Eugene Ankomah, which I think is Ankomah, Eugene Ankomah. And what he's done is he's taken this book and he's put a cover on it. I've even got the receipt inside the book. This is the receipt. Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
And then the pages, inside the pages of the book, for instance, here, he's put cotton, well, because I bought it at the fair, he's put cotton clouds. Yeah.
Wow.
But also he's done, like, he's weaved into the pages.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And also he's like, here he's done a painting of like a bird, but the next page he's cut the bird out.
Wow.
And then if you go on a bit further, there's a whole load of fag ends.
Oh yeah.
Hold on. Can you see it? No.
Oh yeah, I did see you holding it up before.
Yeah, and it's like and there is like he's stuck things in it and cut things out. And when we were at Parliament House Gallery, we did a workshop on books and things, and we had to go doing something similar. This is like it's almost like a man diving into the water, and I'm not sure if it's sort of appropriate with what the book's talking about, that is giving him the idea to sort of take the book and do this to it. But I loved the book when I saw it, and that's a one-off, you know, there isn't another one like that.
Yeah.
So
we do actually have a collection of artist books also at Wellcome. I'm not sure how many of those are digitised, but feel free to search our catalogue. We have a lot of artist books as well in Wellcome, which is similar to that, kind of beautifully
the one that I did, as part of my degree show, we all had to make and print something that was future of the book, right? And that was the title of the actual thing that everyone did. So we collaborated together, put in pairs, and made our own postcards and printed one side then the other. And then we were given the task of making that into a book, also looking into the future of the book. And that was very interesting because, of course, that was sort of at that period of time, turn of the century, they'd just come out with the first digital cameras and things like that. So it was all quite interesting. And what I ended up doing was I ended up taking my postcard and I got my friend to model in the bath for me, reading a book by Gauguin, his Tahitian people, and chillaxing in the bath. And then I sort of altered it, and that was my postcard. And then what I did was I sewed every other person's postcard into a book, which was like a concertina type book, but using, like, you know, the plastic files that you use, because I believed fundamentally, because at the time they're saying, what is the future of the book? And people were saying, oh, it's going to go because the digital technology is just going to go rife. And I was like, yeah, but look at it even at the moment. What do you get with your computer? Tons of books to tell you how it operates. So, and also I was looking into the relaxation of sitting in a bath and being able to read a book. And that was the idea of my piece. And I actually sold one of them, and I've still got some somewhere. I have to see if I can look it out or something. And then I did sort of like a cardboard paper design for the outer part of it. So basically, I just wanted to kind of share that, you know, because it's important. Books are very, very important. The fact they're so tactile, the fact that they give us visual codes towards our culture, and, like you say, recipes, or even the Bible. I mean, the Gutenberg press, the Bible was the first thing ever printed, obviously due to religion. And obviously pre that, you had the monks doing all the illuminated manuscripts, etc. So yeah, it's very important. I've really enjoyed this talk, so thank you very much.
Thank you, that's very kind, thank you. I've really enjoyed hearing like all your collections as well.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much to Alex for your presentation, and thank you to everybody who has shared. It's been lovely to see your work as well. It's really made it like a really nice personal session, I think. So yeah, thank you for joining us, and hopefully we're going to be running some more of these introducing collections talks, where we'll be introducing various different collections. But if you follow our newsletter or social media, you'll see those come up, and you can register for them just like you registered for today's event. But yeah, hope you all have lovely weekends, and yes, thank you very much for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Keep safe. Bye.